Start with a difficult experiment, thought experiment. Imagine yourself in 2040. 25 years ago, from now. Imagine, you don't have to imagine if you're married or have children or whatever, but how will the world look like in 2040? 25 years from now. Who thinks the world will run on renewables by then? Let me see hands. Who thinks the world can run on renewables in 2040? Can? Let's first say can. Okay, that's a good question. Who thinks the world will run on renewables? Only a few. That's disappointing because you are the people who have to make that happen. You are the engineers. You are the ones who, if you think it can be done, you have to do it. You are the engineers who have to do it. So, thank you for helping me thinking about 2040. I know for a student it's very difficult to look that far in the future. The time horizon of most students will be maybe 24 hours, maybe a few weeks. Maybe your biggest worry is where you will have your drinks tonight and who will be around and whether you will get lucky or not. But so thanks. My biggest worry 25 years ago was, who the hell am I going to ask to join me to the next gala? And I had to get advice from these guys, so I'm the one drinking. I thought that was the most important thing to do as a student. But I had to get advice from these guys, which girls to ask for the next gala, and that didn't help much. So, 25 years ago, I studied mechanical engineering. After that, I was a mechanical engineer for 12 years before I became a journalist. And let me make one confession. I was a mechanical engineer, so I learned how to design machines. I sold machines. And all these machines ran on fossil fuels, and I had no idea what the result was of burning fossil fuels. I had no idea what CO2 was, and I had no idea what global warming was. You don't have that luxury. So I will get back to that. So I graduated in '94. Then I worked, I joined the Navy because that was still usual at that time. Then I worked as an engineer for 10 years. Then I decided to become a journalist. That was in 2006. And that was quite an important year because I hope you recognize this guy. Who does recognize him? Not everybody, but that's Gore, the one who really put global warming on the, let's say, global agenda. So after 2006, everybody who reads the newspapers doesn't have the luxury of the luxury I had as an engineer, not realizing what CO2 and fossil fuels would do to the world. So Al Gore was around. He made his movie in the first year I was a journalist. Then I decided, okay, I'm a mechanical engineer. I understand energy. I like it. It's important. So I'm going to write about energy. So I was an energy journalist for 10 years. In that 12 years, I was an ignorant engineer, as I call it. Something very important happened. And that's renewables. Thanks to Germany. I hope. Are there any Germans in the audience? Thank you for speeding up the energy transition, because the Germans really made by subsidizing solar panels. The mass production came around, and solar panels got more and more cheap. In the same time, the time of easy oil was over. In the previous century, getting oil out of the ground was quite easy, as you know. You just made a hole in the ground and it came out naturally. If it didn't come out naturally, you put a yes man on it. But it was very cheap to get oil out of the ground. This time of easy oil has ended now. Oil gets more and more expensive, and that's because it's more and more expensive to get it out of the ground. You have seen that oil companies have to go to the deep sea, they have to go to the North Pole, they have to use fracking technology. So it's quite logical that fossil fuels get more expensive and renewable energy, which is purely technology, gets more and more cheap. So this is quite an, you can draw for quite an easy graph about it. Fossil fuels get, by shocks, more and more expensive. Some people think the oil price is low right now, but it's still twice as much as in 2000, even if you compensate for inflation. Meanwhile, technology gets cheaper and cheaper. So we will soon get the point that these lines cross, and then fossil fuels will be phased out. I think we are very close to that. There's some place in the earth, on the earth where the sun shines a lot. You already get the electricity from solar panels cheaper than from coal-fired plants or gas-fired plants. So I think most of you know this famous expression, the Stone Age didn't end because lack of stones. This is an expression first done by an oil minister in Saudi Arabia in the 70s. In the 70s in Saudi Arabia, they already realized the oil age will end. And it will end before we run out of oils. Same way as the Stone Age ended. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones, no. Because there was a better technology, and that was bronze. And that point we are also right now. There's a much better technology. We have renewables. We can use the energy of the sun, make it into electricity, make it into another form of energy, and that's a superior technology to oil, and to coal and to gas. So imagine what will happen if we can get rid of oil and move over to renewables. This has been my dream as a journalist for 10 years. Why don't we speed up this process? I will get back to that later. Because when we move over to renewables, imagine no exhaust, no pollution. We don't have to negotiate for our energy with guys like Putin. We don't have to get our energy from the Middle East. So there are a lot of reasons to move from fossil to renewable energy. I'm here for a group of students. You're sustainable students. Duurzame studenten, a lot of students who study industrial ecology, so I don't want to talk about that too long. I just want to give you one example of what I call disruptive innovation. Did any follow a kind of exam in disruptive innovation? Is that a standard exam in the curriculum in Delft or the university? I think it should be. Because disruptive innovation is, I think for engineers, a very important concept to understand. Disruptive innovation, I will first tell it in an abstract way, and then I will give you some examples. Disruptive innovation, which is happening in the energy industry right now, is when there's a new technology around, but not only a new technology, but also somebody invents a new business model. And Kodak is still the best example. Does anybody you know the example of Kodak? Some of you know. You might know Kodak missed the opportunity to move from film rolls to digital photography and went bankrupt. But what a lot of people don't know is that Kodak had the technology in-house. They had developed digital photography themselves, only they were sitting on a very lucrative business model, which was selling film rolls like this. Every time you click the camera, it was cash for Kodak. Now, somebody else makes money when you make your photos. And that was the big dilemma for companies like Kodak. They had a brilliant business model. They saw there was a new technology, but they couldn't think of a new way to make money with that new technology. The end of the story is other companies did, and other companies are making that money. Kodak went bankrupt. Now when you make a photo, initially nobody makes money, maybe the one who sold you the camera or sold you the phone. But when you put it on Facebook, Facebook is making money from advertisements. So a new technology, and that's a very, I think for engineers, a very important concept to understand. Disruptive innovation happens when a new technology finds a new business model. You see that with the utilities now. They used to have a very simple business model, building huge power plants, selling it to the public. Now there's a new technology, solar panels, wind turbines, and people are using them themselves to generate electricity. So they have to find a new way to make money from people who have solar panels on their roofs. You see that with Nokia. You see that with KPN missing on the new technology WhatsApp. You probably can't imagine, but before WhatsApp there was SMS. Anybody remember that? I paid 25 cents, or my company paid 25 cents per SMS I sent. And KPN was thinking, okay, that's a brilliant business model. And then suddenly WhatsApp came up, and they were disrupted by this new technology. Very simple example. Apple is also a company who knows how to reinvent themselves. And I just want to give you another example of how fast disruptive technology can go. This is New York City, 5th Avenue, 1900. You see a street full of horses and carriages. Only horses and carriages. By that time there was a new technology on the market. There was a car with internal combustion engine. And people were looking at this picture, couldn't imagine that a car with an internal combustion engine would replace all these horses and carriages. And what happened? 13 years later, this is 5th Avenue, full of cars. And again, it was not only a new technology, but also a new business model. The new technology was, of course, the internal combustion engine. The new business model was that you could buy the car on payment. So you didn't pay up front, but you pay the car during the time you owned it. You could pay for it in like 15, 20 years. Another disruption happened in the Netherlands. This country ran on coal gas. 1959, we found gas in the north of the Netherlands, in Groningen, and 10 years later, all households in the Netherlands were, 75% of the houses in the Netherlands were connected to a gas, to this Groningen gas field. So within 10 years, a disruption can happen. Let me show you one other group picture. This is my previous life as a journalist. This was on a press trip to one of Shell's biggest factories in Qatar, that they have built a factory, spent 20 billion to build a factory who makes natural gas into diesel. And here you can see me in my most active role as a journalist. You see my colleagues from Hong Kong and Singapore already know what to write. And I always wanted to ask Shell the question, nice story about natural gas into diesel. It's it's not a clean technology, but it's at least less polluting than coal and oil. But what the hell are you going to do about renewables? Because more and more I came convinced of the fact, writing about it, that renewables were on the verge of replacing fossil fuels, and it's happening, but it's happening very slowly. And I thought, what would happen if a company like Shell and all the other oil majors, if these companies who have billions to spend, if these companies are going to invest these billions into renewable energy. And with Shell, I always use the example, why spend billions on the North Pole while you can also spend these billions building wind farms on the North Sea? So, as a journalist, I've asked this many times. I've written a lot of op-eds about it. And of course, as a journalist, you always hope the CEO of an oil company reads your op-ed and says, yeah, this guy is completely right. This is what I'm going to do. This didn't happen. And then I thought, okay, there's another way of convincing the oil majors, and that's by shareholdership. So I walked around with the idea. A year ago, I decided, okay, if I really want to materialize this idea, I have to stop as a journalist and start being an activist shareholder. So I started a movement of Shell shareholders who all are convinced of the fact that Shell can make a real big difference in speeding up the energy transition. And why Shell? Because this is a company within the oil industry, I think the most innovative. They hire the brightest guys from Delft. I think they still do. Is Shell still a popular employer among students? Not among most of you, I suppose. But I even want to encourage you to work for them, be a change agent, as you just called it. But imagine Shell would spend these billions in renewables. It would speed up the energy transition. And again, we're talking about disruptive innovation. The technology is there. Shell knows how to produce solar panels. They know how to produce, to build factories. They know they easily can build 1,000 windmills on the North Sea. They're good in offshore technology. Only they don't know what business model they should employ. And if they wait too long, then others will do, and they will miss the opportunity. So, how are we going to convince an oil carrier like Shell to change course? That's of course the most difficult question. And the way we are doing it is by, as I told you, by shareholdership, by becoming shareholders. And we need three kinds of shareholders. That is new shareholders, people like you who are convinced we can move to renewables. Not all of you are convinced you will, but by far the majority of you I just saw is convinced we can move to renewables. And a company like Shell can speed this process up instead of slowing it down. So you can become a shareholder, and that's by buying one share. If you're interested, I will show you the website later. We have over 700 shareholders now. These are people with one share, people with up to 20,000 shares, and we're now trying to convince the pension funds to gather behind us. I know some of you may have heard of this movement, ABP Fossil Free. There's a lot of pressure on the pension funds to to divest from fossil fuels and invest in renewables. They have a very hard time finding this new investment, and we offer them a solution by if they join our movement, then we have enough shareholders to really convince Shell that they should change course. And so we're trying to convince the pension funds that they have only one choice, that is divest or force Shell and the other oil majors will follow, force them to change course. So you can, if you buy a share on our website, you can easily send an email to Ben van Beurden. He's now CEO of Shell. He also graduated here in Delft, 10 years, I think in the 80s he graduated as a chemical engineer. We have to convince this guy that although he spent 30 years of his life looking for oil and gas and selling oil and gas, this area is over and now there's a new technology. So that's where he needs people like you who can convince him that his view on the world, which has been shaped here in Delft 30 years ago, which has been shaped the last 30 years looking for oil and gas, that days are over. So he needs guys like you to convince him that he should change course and invest in renewables. And this is not because we want Shell to, it's so important that Shell survives. It's nice for Shell to do this, but it's more important if they don't do this, they will go bankrupt, only it will take another 30 years. So another 30 years putting CO2 in the atmosphere. A lot of people ask me, are you on a moon mission? Yes, we are. And I can also say, no, we are not, because some people, Sandra has the catchphrase, it always seems impossible until it's done. And this was also with the moon mission. The moon mission looked very difficult, but at the end of the day, it was quite easy. It was just 3 days away, and you were on the moon. So Things always seem impossible until it's done. And that's also with getting enough shareholders to convince Shell to change course. But I think it's more difficult than the moon mission. By the way, the most important thing we learned from the moon mission, all the 24 people who have been around the moon or on the moon, 12 people have been really on the moon. These 12 people and the other 12 who circled around the moon, they all came home with this picture in their mind, realizing how small and fragile the Earth is. And this has helped the environmental movement a lot. When you look from the moon to the Earth, you see this blue planet in the middle of darkness, and you see, okay, this is a fragile planet. This is where we live. We should keep it like this. So our mission is a moon mission, and then Shell's mission to change from a fossil company to a renewable company is an even bigger moon mission. But the big difference with the moon mission is there was no necessity. It was just a nice thing to do. It was maybe Kennedy wanted to prove to the Russians that he could build better rockets, but there was no necessity to go to the moon. Now we are on a moon mission, which really is a necessity. And therefore I want to end with you, because I see you as also soon-to-be young engineers being on the moon mission, because you are the engineers who have to really make the energy transition happen. You are on a huge and important challenge. You are in the same position as the people who are at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This is a huge challenge. You can do all kinds of things, but there's no alternative. You can be change agents in big companies. You can build houses that don't need fossil fuels. You can build smart grids. You can build new infrastructure. Cars who no longer run on internal combustion engines, but run on electricity. You have to build planes. You have to design ships. So you engineers, you are the ones. How the world will look like in 2040, where I started with, will be your job. So let me finalize with saying that if you don't feel the hairs on the back of your neck rising now, two things can be. Either I'm not telling the story right enough, or engineering is not for you. I hope it's the first. Thank you.